Hello, BookTube. Well, it's the first day of October, and that calls for two different BookTube rituals, doesn't it? It calls for a wrap-up of the month that's just ended, and a TBR of the month that's coming. And in both cases, for me, I have to adapt those rituals just a bit, because I don't have a personal life. I don't do anything except read and take care of my little schnauzer. But that's basically it. And if you think about, and also as you've seen, if you've watched the 80 million videos on this channel, there's nothing rote about my enthusiasm for reading. I absolutely love it. I love it like a kid on Christmas morning every single time. So if you combine those things, think about your own life. If you combine those things, if you had an absolutely nuclear, always renewing, incredible enthusiasm for leaping into new books, and you had all day long, every day, all night long, every night, you'd get a lot of reading done. And that's the adaptation that I need to do for these rituals, is that they're not made for all. I can't do them for all the reading that I do. I can't do a September wrap-up for all the books that I've read in September. But I just recently did a wrap-up of a previous month where I give you just a rundown of 10 books from that month that are sort of a glance back at the month of 10 books that, that really jump out and that are well worth your time. And I thought I would do that again. A lot of you seem to like that. So I have the trusty notebook here, and we'll just do some books from September as a wrap-up that we can talk about. And the first one is the best-selling book from September of 2018 in any language, in any country, and that is Fear by Bob Woodward. Ordinarily, I would leave it out of a list anything like this, because I have learned about myself that if I start to talk about political stuff on this channel, I have to delete the video because I come out of my rage-induced frenzy half an hour later and realize that's all I've talked about for 30 minutes, and that is no more interesting to me than it is to you. But I intend to control myself this time around. I read Fear by Bob Woodward. He is an indispensable reporter. The Trump administration, the Trump White House, has generated a whole bookcase full of books, and there are many, many more to come. Every single person connected with the Trump White House has been approached by many major publishing houses and offered enormous amounts of money for their book deals. And the few of those people who are going to remain unindicted will probably like that money. But even in a ruck of books like that, a book by Bob Woodward stands out. I remember when each of his George W. Bush books came out, when his Obama books came out. I remember each time the shiver that went through the reading world, at least, the new book political reading world, because Woodward gets sources, and he keeps things on record, and he is scrupulous. And sometimes his pictures are utterly damning. He is a fly on the wall, but not in a gossipy kind of way. And that was true in Fear. Fear is a horrifying book. The title, like most of his titles, are well chosen. The title strikes in many different directions. It's not just that everyone in the White House is afraid of everyone else, and at this point in 2018, in late 2018, everyone in the West Wing is sure that everyone else in the West Wing is covertly taping them. Imagine that being a workplace. But not only that, but also the title also speaks to what your primary emotion will be when you finish it. Whether you're a Trump partisan or not, you finish the book really feeling like this is an extremely dangerous way to run a country. That anything could go wrong at any minute. There's no safeguards in place. I went into it expecting that. When you read a Woodward book on the current political situation, whether you agree with the person in politics or not, you know that you're going to get raw edges, just knuckles, straight to the chin of the received opinion. And this book delivers, absolutely. And the thing that's devastating about it is that despite squealings from several of its high-profile targets, you can almost be certain that every word of this is accurate. The amount of legitimate contradictions to any of Bob Woodward's vetted and carefully written work over the last 40 years is infinitesimally small. well, there was something that I noticed running throughout the book. I mentioned it in my review that I didn't expect, and that is a mordant, very graveyard sense of humor that runs throughout. A great number of the scenarios that are recounted in the book are shaped with a subtle, humorous undercurrent. I don't know how accurately to describe it, other than there's an extremely hangdog, there's an element of extremely Jewish humor running throughout this book. The deadpan, I expected the worst, I got much worse than the worst, that sort of Jewish comedy. There's an element of that running throughout this book that isn't strong, it isn't pronounced, it never pratfalls, but I wasn't expecting it, and it's definitely there, and it's exquisitely sculpted. At times, exquisitely sculpted. It actually makes reading about what otherwise, no matter what you think, has to be viewed as just a serial portrait of complete dangerous incompetence. It makes that portrait bearable in a way that I wasn't expecting. So, I don't know. We'll start off the bat with a very problematic case, because I don't know that I can recommend Fear unless you are already hooked. If you already have, the IV hooked up to your veins and you are taking your outrage in liquid form all day long and you can't do without it, then you've probably already read this book, but you absolutely have to. You absolutely have to. Who knows what the future will be. I mean, I know the broad outlines of the future, although no one believes me. That's all right. No one has to believe me. I know the broad outline of the future, that this person will leave office in 2024 with approval ratings in the 70s. I've been saying that since he was a candidate. I say it still. That will certainly happen. There will be no impeachment. There will be no 25th Amendment. There will be no outrage. There will be no riots in the streets. There will be no check of any kind. This person will leave office after 2 terms with approval ratings sky high. And but aside from that broad outline, I don't know what tomorrow's news will be. And this book, well, it was for a while a part of that news. The news has moved on from there, but it's in my mind one of the first indispensable Trump books to read. So we'll start with Trouble. The next one is big. It's a big, ambitious thing, but it's a much clearer recommend, and that's These Truths by the historian Jill Lepore. It's her big 1-volume history of the United States. And on my first read through, I was irritated by it a lot of the time, because it seems to be not just critical of America, but hating America. Where if in the first 30 pages of A History of America, you're talking about genocide and rape and slavery, when I read it the first time, I thought, okay, yes, there's a lot of iniquity in America's story, but you are overshadowing here. You are letting it overshadow a lot of good. An enormous amount of good in the American story as well. Sorry, I live next to a war zone. But my second read was slower. It was more meticulous, pencil in hand. And this book is suffused with hope, and it's so beautifully written. It's this author's best work, and once I saw that counterbalance was there, then I realized that this might just be the best 1-volume history of America that's ever been written, because the ones that don't start with rape and pillage often don't include it, and you have to. I worried when I had that bombarding me in the face right away, that was going to be the gist of the book, that this was going to be an academically acclaimed and slightly highbrow version of the People's History of the United States. It's not that. It instead is the most balanced and maybe the most passionate 1-volume history of America that I've ever read, and I think I've read them all. So I enormously recommend it. It's not easy reading at times. The American story is at times a staggeringly dark one, but it's written by a true believer, so And then our third book, I've mentioned it on this channel before. It's by Lisa Brennan-Jobs, and it's called Small Fry. It's her memoir about being Steve Jobs' daughter. And I had already, I confess, I went in a little bit prejudiced, because I'd already heard from some people whose opinions I trust that this is not what you might think. This is not a simple memoir, or a celebrity memoir, or a complaint fest. There's more here. There's more eloquence and there's more heart. And boy, oh boy, were those people right. What a book. What a book. It's certainly not a hagiography of Steve Jobs. I don't think that would be possible. But it's also not a hagiography of its author. I don't know how to recommend it, except that it's a tremendous reading experience. It won't give you a whole lot of insight into Steve Jobs, the mastermind of Apple. And it'll give you a whole lot of insight into the author, but you don't know her, and you've never heard of her. She's not in the news. She's not a doer or a maker. It's just an amazing life story. I don't know what went into writing this book, but it could have been so much less than what it ended up being. I applaud the author for that. Then next we'll go from the sublime to the ridiculous, but I want to put a couple of romance novels on this list. And this next one is by Lynsay Sands. And it's the latest in her Argonaut series. She has a series of mass-market romance novels about the Argonaut family. They're all immortal. They're all extremely quarrelsome with each other and with the whole world. And this one is called Vampires Like It Hot. It is an extremely sexy, extremely urban, extremely contemporary, extremely modern-day supernatural romance. So if that's your thing, and you don't know about the Argonaut novels, my God, you have to just bone up on them, if that's the right word. Go to the library or to your local used bookstore. We'll have some of them, I'm sure. And, start at the beginning. You don't need to. You don't need to do that. These are extremely well compartmentalized novels, so you don't need to start at the beginning to enjoy Vampires Like It Hot. But why waste the rest of the series? You're going to want to read them anyway. They're terrifically good. As popcorn reading, I should say. And then our next one is something I mentioned on this channel before. It's Washington Black by S.E. Edugyan. Story. It's a novel about a slave boy, and it was longlisted for the Man Booker Prize. And I thought, before I read a word of it, I thought, well, okay, this sounds like it could be incredibly manipulative in a very obvious and ham-handed way. But I loved it. Absolutely love the book. Not only is I thought, just brilliantly written, but it's not ham-handed. The concept, the boy, the evil people in the book are not. I was expecting them all to be one note, and they're not. And the ending, the last 50 pages, I think is almost unclassifiable. It almost feels to me, I don't know anything about this author, I don't know anything about the genesis of this book, but it almost feels to me like the first part, the huge majority of the book, up till the last 50 pages, was settled and written at one point, and the last 50 pages were settled and written at a very different point. I'm not saying that it's awkwardly grafted on. The shift works, and the change at the end works in the context of the rest of the novel, but it feels very different. I strongly recommend it. Those of you who are wary of contemporary fiction and just don't know, especially award-nominated fiction, you've just been disappointed or burned and you're wondering what's good and what's not, try Washington Black. Then the next one is an absolute treat if you're a genre fan. It's Port of Shadows by the great Glen Cook. And it's a new Black Company novel. Glen Cook has been writing the adventures of the Black Company. It's this kind of extremely gritty military fantasy fiction. He's been writing them for decades. And you expect, with something like that, when an author comes back to that material and writes a new novel, you expect that you're going to see a step or two missing. But this is terrific. It's every bit as good as every other Black Company novel. Again, with a lot of these books, I sort of have to give you a warning on the spectrum. I'm not sure with this one that it is a recommendation for anyone who has not read the Black Company novels. I'm not 100%. It's a little bit hard for me to tell, even as a professional reviewer. It's a little bit hard for me to go into a book like this or a series that I love so much and actually figure out how much of this will work if you don't know the series. But even so, my warning bells were going off. If you're interested, I would read the first Black Company novel first. That's pretty much, you don't have to read any of the others, I don't think. And the publisher has made that very easy because, as I mentioned on this channel a little bit earlier, the publisher decided to come out with a mass market paperback of the first Black Company novel. It will be in your bookstore for a criminal $7. It will be in your bookstore. So you'll be able to read and get the groundwork for this one. But oh boy, Port of Shadows was wonderful. Then the next one is, it's deep. It's extremely troubling and thought-provoking. It's called The Jungle Grows Back by Robert Kagan. And the reference in the title is to, well, in my mind, I can't help but think of Letting the Jungle In by Rudyard Kipling, a Jungle Book story that underscores the fact that if you stop civilization, the wild world takes over in almost no time at all. It happens very fast. It happens much faster than we like to think. We like to look around on pavements and skyscrapers and whatnot and think, even if we disappeared tomorrow, these things would still be here in 1,000 years. And oh no, no. And what Kagan uses that as a metaphor for stripping away. What happens if you strip away not the physical stuff of civilization, but the intangibles, the philosophies, democracy, equal participation, representation, diversity. If you endanger those things or pull them away, or start to pull them away, the jungle grows back. It's an extremely effective meditation on our current moment. But it like so much else that this author writes, it's much broader. It has a much broader feet to it. So, if you want a very smart sort of meta look at the current world, at the current crisis in the world, this is a book, and it's not that long. If I remember correctly, these books, their length sort of blurs together because length is easy for me. But I think that it's just a concentrated shot in the arm. Oh, this author's worth reading anyway, though. Excuse me. Then this next one is by Merv Emery, and it's The Personality Brokers. And it's a terrific book about the Myers-Briggs personality test. And at first I thought that it would be mostly about that. But the narrative is about Catherine Briggs and Isabel Briggs-Meyer. And a large chunk of the book is telling their stories, and they're amazing. They're a mother-daughter team, and the mother especially steals the book. Just steals the book. This author had to do a prodigious amount of research on their lives, on the stuff that they went through. Some of it connected with their famous personality test, and lots of it not. So if you're interested in the Myers-Briggs personality test, well, you have to read this book. Obviously, this is the book that test has been waiting for. But even if you're not, this author, did I mention the author? Merv Emery, yeah. This author will pull you in. I mean, I was interested in the personality test before I read the book, but I was totally caught up in the personal stories. That takes work to do. It's tricky, and it's done really well in this book. Then the next one is something that I praised on this channel before. I think I looked forward to it. I talked about it. I've reviewed it. And now I'm going to say a parting goodbye to it. I'm going to recommend it one more time. And that's How to Invent Everything by Ryan North, which is just a tremendous book. One of those rare kinds of books where you can just hand it to anybody and you know they'll love it, no matter what they read, no matter how much they read. And it's the premise is that you have an individual time travel capsule. You can go anywhere in human history. And what happens if, through no litigious fault of the company, you cannot sue, through no fault of the manufacturer of the time travel device, what happens if you end up stranded in the time period where you've gone to? So you've decided that it would be really fun to see Leonardo da Vinci paint the Mona Lisa. But when you go back to your time travel device, it's on its side and sparks are coming out and you can't get back home. Well, then how much do you know about the technological marvels of your own age? How much do you know about all the stuff in your world right now that you take for granted? Electronics, indoor lighting, indoor plumbing, antibiotics. How much do you know about any of that? Yes, you're a time traveler now who's now lodged 500 years in the past, but are you helpless? And this book is sort of your primer and your basic fix-it how-to guide on all of the stuff that you're supposed to know, on all the stuff that you know that they don't, no matter what time period. And it's just amazingly fun. Just amazingly fun. You get breakdowns on absolutely everything, from your own body to the solar system to sextants. It's amazingly fun. Hand it to anybody, and they're going to love it. Then the next one Is something I mentioned on this channel before as well. It's a full-dress traditional biography in a year that has not seen many of them, at least up until this point. The autumn book season is going to be just swamped with traditional biographies. But this was one of the only ones that I'd seen up until this point, and it is tremendous. Just tremendous. It's called Rush, and it's by Stephen Fried. And it's his biography of Dr. Benjamin Rush, who was a founding father. He was known by everyone. He was in correspondence with everyone. And has been largely forgotten when you think of the roll call of founding fathers. No one ever thinks of Benjamin Rush. That wouldn't have been true in his own day. The other founding fathers would have named him pretty quick on any list. And Fried gets him. There were two. In 2018, there were two biographies of Benjamin Rush. One was much shorter. Reed's is a nice, long, full book. He does a huge amount of research. Groundbreaking, some of it. It dispenses with a whole bunch of the usual qualifications about Rush. Like, Rush had, some scientific and medical opinions that fit with the theories of his day that, of course, did not pan out. They did not pan out. That's hardly anything to hold against somebody, and yet people have held it against Rush. They've said, isn't it a shame that he was wrong about X, Y, and Z? Instead, Fried has the inspired decision to find all the rest of Rush, all the rest of his life, and presents the man in the round in this book in a way that classic biographies do, and all of it is told with such energy and eloquence that I know I've mentioned it before, I've sung its praises before, I want to sing its praises one more time before we move on. That I know a lot of you are interested in history and historical biographies. I know a lot of you are interested in the Founding Fathers and the American Revolution. Don't let this book pass you by. It is on the subject of the American Revolution. It is, in 2018, easily the best book. So don't let it pass you by. If you have to go to your library or whatnot, or indulge for a Christmas present, but one way or another, it's an amazing book. You will make the acquaintance not only of an incredible figure in American history that you maybe didn't know, but through him, his perspectives on a whole bunch of names you do know. So I won't belabor the point. I just want to. There are two books next here. Our next two books are very much of a type. They're a type of book I really like, and that is books about reading, books about the joy of reading. There were a whole bunch of them just recently in 2018, and these are two of the best. The first one is On Reading Well by Karen Swallow Prior, and the other is I'd Rather Be Reading by Anne Bogel. And I recommend both of them wholeheartedly. There have been quite a few books on reading in 2018. There's been a bumper crop for the kind of reading that I really like. But even in that bumper crop, these two stand out as just terrific examples of their kind. You will love their authors. You will jot down all the titles that come up in passing or directly. And when you're finished, you won't dream of putting them on the donation pile for the library or the charity shop. They will not only go right on a keeper shelf, they'll go near to your nightstand, because you'll want to revisit them. They're warm, smart, knowing celebrations of the joy of what we all love here on BookTube. So I recommend both of them. And keep in mind, I'll put a list of all these things down below. Don't worry. Then the next one it's big, ambitious historical fiction. It's The Lost Queen by Signe Pike, where she turns her focus way, way back into the myths of British history to look at right on the border of factual annals and mythology, because the Lost Queen in the title of the book is also in mytho-history the sister of Merlin the magician. And I was thinking, when I started, I was thinking, well, okay, so this is a weird proto-historical world. You're not going to be able to put your foot down on very firm ground in terms of facts throughout this thing. It's not a short book. But it didn't matter. I was, to use the reviewing euphemism, swept away. This author really, really knows what she's doing. And the historical moments, the panoramas of the Britain of the day are wonderfully done, but it's really the personal stuff. She has a real ear for character interaction. That works throughout and kept me reading. So if you're wondering, if you've seen it and you're wondering, it's her debut novel, I believe. So you look at this thing, you might wonder, okay, I don't know what that is. It's beautifully designed by its publisher. That might catch your eye. But I wanted to add a recommendation to it as well. That you would really, really enjoy it. It'll suck you in right away. Then the next one is by Kai-Fu Lee, and it is called AI Superpowers, China and Silicon Valley and the Future. It's one of those dispatches from the present day, you know, so it's one of those books that you'll consume very quickly in the light of modern headlines, and in 2 years or 1 year or 5 years, someone will write something that supplants it completely, and that's okay. We have to read those books anyway. But this one is really spiritedly done, and really taught me a lot about where not only the innovations of the future, the immediate future, the future that will affect us all, are coming, but also where the warfare of that future is coming. Just incredibly thought-provoking. Very well done. And the last one that I want to mention, then we'll wrap this up, because this has gone on a long time. The last one is by Cale Atkinson. It's a kid's picture book. It's called Sir Simon, Super Scarer. And it's about a ghost called Simon who has finally graduated from haunting all sorts of boring things to haunting a house. An actual house. He's really happy about that, but it entails a lot of work, because ghosts have a lot to do. And not only is it haunting a house, but he got a house that's inhabited by a little old lady. And they're easy to scare, but they take a lot of care and work. And so Simon has a lot of work ahead of him. But it turns out that quickly into the little old lady's life comes a little boy who sees Simon right away. And Simon has the inspired idea of, well, if this annoying kid is going to be around, why don't I put him to work doing some of my scaring duties for me? And what results is, I wish, when kids' picture books, some of them, when they're done really well, you just wish they would go on and on and on. And this is one of them where I just wish it would go on and on and on. So I will list it down below, but it is, once again, as we've talked about on this channel many times, when we talk about kids' picture books, we will all indulge in the fiction that we are buying these for a kid. So I'll just say, a kid will find it extremely fun, a huge amount of fun. Not you, of course. You're busy reading Tolstoy, but a kid will find it extremely fun. And that's it. That is our September 2018 wrap-up. Just a few books that I wanted to look back on and recommend to you. I'll list them all down below. And the other part of the ritual for the changing of a month is a TBR, and I'll do that next. So I will wrap this up now, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.